The Crusades and the Development of Medieval Knighthood. Introduction: The rise of knighthood and the crusading ideal. The Crusades, which spanned several centuries and involved thousands of knights from Europe, had a profound impact on the development of medieval knighthood. The ideal of the knight, as a warrior devoted to both martial prowess and religious duty, was heavily shaped by the Crusades. The image of the Crusader knight, with his devotion to both faith and chivalric virtues, became a defining figure in medieval culture and literature. The Crusades not only provided knights with new opportunities for fame, wealth, and land, but also served as a spiritual mission that solidified their status as defenders of Christianity. Chapter 1. The Origins and Evolution of Medieval Knighthood. Feudal Knighthood. The origins of medieval knighthood can be traced back to the feudal system of the early Middle Ages. Knights were initially vassals who swore allegiance to a lord in exchange for land, known as fiefs, and the promise of military service. Feudal obligations. In the feudal system, a knight was expected to serve as a mounted warrior who would fight on behalf of his lord during times of war. In return, he would be granted land or other forms of wealth. This system established the role of knights as both soldiers and landholders, giving them a unique position in society. Chivalric code. By the 12th century, the concept of chivalry began to emerge alongside feudal knighthood. This code of conduct emphasized values such as bravery, loyalty, courtesy, and honor, particularly in relation to the knight's behavior toward women, the weak, and the church. Knighthood and the church. As the role of knights became more formalized, the church also played an important role in shaping the identity of the knight. The church encouraged knights to uphold Christian values and protect the faithful. Spiritual service. The idea that knighthood had a spiritual dimension took hold as knights began to view their role as defenders of Christianity. This was most evident in the development of the military orders during the Crusades, where knights were not only warriors but also monastic figures dedicated to the protection of Christian pilgrims and holy sites. Chapter 2. The Impact of the Crusades on Knighthood. The Crusades as a defining moment for knighthood. The Crusades marked the point where knighthood and religious duty were irrevocably intertwined. Knights were not only asked to serve their lords but also to take part in a religious mission that aimed to defend and expand Christendom. Knights as holy warriors. The Crusades offered knights an opportunity to combine their martial skills with religious zeal. The idea of fighting for the faith became central to the knightly ethos. This transformation of knights into religious warriors was reinforced by Pope Urban II's call to arms at the Council of Clermont in 1095, which urged knights to take up the cross and liberate Jerusalem. The promise of indulgences and salvation. The Church offered spiritual rewards, such as indulgences, for those who participated in the Crusades. This promise of forgiveness for sins, along with the opportunity to fight for a divine cause, attracted many knights, who saw the crusade as both a military campaign and a path to spiritual salvation. The creation of military orders. The Crusades gave rise to several military orders, which became central to the development of medieval knighthood. The Knights Templar, 1119, founded to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land, the Knights Templar quickly became one of the most powerful military orders. Templars combined monastic vows with the duties of a knight, adopting a strict code of conduct that included chastity, poverty, and obedience. The Templars' success in battle and their ability to accumulate wealth made them both revered and feared. The Knights Hospitaller, 1113, originally established to care for sick pilgrims in Jerusalem, the Hospitallers evolved into a military order that played a major role in defending the Crusader states. Like the Templars, they also adopted monastic vows but focused on providing medical care as well as military defense. The Teutonic Knights, 1190s, founded during the Third Crusade to aid the Christianization of Prussia, the Teutonic Knights combined their religious duty with territorial expansion. Their military campaigns in the Baltic region helped extend the influence of the Crusader ideals into Northern Europe. Chapter 3. Chivalric Ideals and the Crusades. The Crusades helped to solidify the role of knights as paragons of chivalric virtue. The ideals of chivalry, particularly those articulated in medieval literature, were inspired and reinforced by the religious and martial exploits of Crusader knights. the chivalric code and the crusading mission. The Crusades provided the perfect context for the development of the knightly code of chivalry, which was heavily influenced by Christian principles of honor, duty, and the protection of the weak. Christianity and chivalry. The notion of knights as both warriors and protectors of the faith was central to the chivalric code. The ideals of bravery, loyalty, and generosity were infused with religious purpose, as knights saw themselves as defending Christendom from external threats. The role of women. Chivalric literature, which flourished during the Crusades, often portrayed knights as honorable protectors of women, an ideal that became a central tenet of the chivalric code. This ideal was not just about knightly behavior but also about elevating women to a revered status, though this was often in the context of courtly love, which had little real-world impact on the lives of women. The influence of crusading literature. Crusading literature further shaped the idealized image of the knight. Epics, romances, and chronicles told tales of knightly valor and religious duty. The Song of Roland and the Knightly Ideal. Written during the First Crusade, the Song of Roland became one of the most famous examples of crusading literature. It presented the crusader knight as a heroic figure, fighting for both honor and God. The poem framed the knightly ethos as a sacred duty, underscoring the deep intertwining of religion and chivalric ideals. Arthurian legends and chivalric romance. While not directly tied to the Crusades, the Arthurian legends and other medieval romances were shaped by the crusading ideals of knights and holy war. The stories of King Arthur, Sir Lancelot, and the Knights of the Round Table epitomize the values of courage, loyalty, and faith, reflecting the high standards expected of knights during the crusading period. Chapter 4. The Decline of Knighthood and the Crusades. By the late medieval period, the crusading movement began to falter, and the role of knights in warfare changed dramatically. Several factors contributed to this decline. The failure of the later Crusades. The inability of later Crusades, such as the Fifth and Sixth Crusades, to achieve their objectives gradually diminished the prestige of the knightly class. The loss of Jerusalem in 1291, the fall of Acre, and the increasing strength of Muslim forces led many to question the efficacy and purpose of further military campaigns. The rise of professional armies. As gunpowder weapons, such as cannons and firearms, began to change the nature of warfare. Chapter 6. The Cultural and Symbolic Legacy of Crusading Knighthood. Despite the decline of the crusading movement and the rise of new forms of warfare, the cultural and symbolic legacy of crusading knighthood remained influential long after the end of the medieval period. The enduring symbol of the knight. Even after the military relevance of knights diminished, the figure of the knight retained its prominence in European culture and became a symbol of honor, virtue, and service. The romanticization of knighthood. During the Renaissance and later periods, the figure of the knight was romanticized in literature and art. Works like Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes, 1605, and Sir Walter Scott's Ivanhoe, 1819, brought the ideals of knighthood back into public consciousness, celebrating the virtues of bravery, loyalty, and the chivalric code, albeit in a more symbolic and less military context. National identity and knighthood. In many European countries, the legacy of the Crusades and knighthood became linked with national identity. Knights were often portrayed as defenders of their homeland and Christian civilization, a portrayal that resonated with emerging European states seeking to solidify their authority and legitimacy. The persistence of chivalric orders. Many of the medieval military orders established during the Crusades continued to exist long after the fall of the Crusader states. These orders adapted to changing circumstances but retained their connection to the crusading ideal of knighthood. Knights Templar. The Knights Templar, although disbanded in the early 14th century, remained an enduring symbol in Western culture, particularly through myths and conspiracy theories. The dramatic tales of their secretive activities, combined with their association with the Crusades, kept their legacy alive. Knights Hospitaller. The Knights Hospitaller, later known as the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, transitioned from a military order to a humanitarian and ceremonial organization. Today, the order focuses on charitable and medical missions, but its medieval roots as a defender of Christendom remain a central part of its identity. Modern chivalric orders. Various chivalric orders continue to exist today, some with noble and ceremonial roles, others with an emphasis on charity and service. These orders are a reminder of the lasting influence the crusading knightly ideal has had on European culture and society. Chapter 7. The influence of crusading knighthood on modern military and cultural traditions. The values and principles associated with crusading knighthood, such as honor, discipline, and service, left a deep imprint on later military traditions and cultural practices. Modern military codes and chivalric virtues. The ideal of the knight shaped the ethos of many modern military institutions. While the role of knights as mounted warriors became obsolete with the advent of firearms and mechanized warfare, their moral and ethical code continued to influence the development of military honor codes. Chivalric virtues in modern militaries. Modern armies, especially in Western countries, often emphasize principles such as bravery, loyalty, self-sacrifice, and respect for comrades, values that resonate with the ideals of knighthood. For example, the British Army's focus on honor and tradition has deep roots in medieval chivalry, and the U.S. military's emphasis on courage and service mirrors the knightly virtues. Cultural impact. The knight in popular culture. In modern literature, film, and other forms of popular culture, the crusading knight has been romanticized, with modern interpretations of knights serving as symbols of heroism and justice. Medieval fantasy and the knightly archetype. Works of fiction, such as J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, 1954 to 1955, and George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire series, 1996, revive the medieval knight as a central character archetype, drawing inspiration from the ideals of the crusading knight valor, loyalty, and the quest for justice. Film and television. Hollywood films, such as Kingdom of Heaven, 2005, depict the crusading knights in dramatic retellings of the events of the Crusades. These portrayals continue to emphasize the knightly virtues, even while presenting a more complex and nuanced view of the Crusades and their participants. The lasting symbol of the Crusader knight. While the Crusades ended centuries ago, the image of the knight defending the faith remains a potent cultural symbol. The knight embodies both the martial prowess and the spiritual devotion of the Crusades, representing the ideal of the warrior who fights for a higher cause. Knighthood as a legacy of service. Modern chivalric orders often emphasize service to humanity, charitable work, and humanitarian efforts, in contrast to the militant nature of medieval knighthood. Nonetheless, the knight remains a symbol of commitment, duty, and honor, principles that continue to resonate in both ceremonial and real-world contexts. Conclusion. The Crusades' enduring impact on knighthood. The Crusades played a central role in shaping the development of medieval knighthood, both as a martial institution and as a symbol of religious duty. The ideals of chivalry, reinforced by the crusading ethos, created a lasting cultural legacy that endured long after the fall of the Crusader states. Though the role of knights in warfare diminished with the advent of new technologies and military tactics, the values of chivalry and the image of the knight as a defender of faith and honor continue to resonate in modern culture. From the pages of medieval literature to the screen depictions of knights in contemporary media, the legacy of the crusading knight endures, highlighting the profound influence the Crusades had on the identity of knighthood and its place in European and global culture.